We are at the 2017 ATA Economic Summit, the first one ever. I'm Transport Topics reporter Ari Ashe, alongside Bob Costello, ATA's chief economist, and Kenny Vieth, the president of ACT Research. Guys, I want to start by saying this. I think it was very successful. What were your thoughts on today's event?
Oh, I thought it was good. It was interesting to bring my counterparts from all these other trade associations and Kenny to give flavors to motor carriers on what's going on with the consumer, housing, on the industrial side, and then trucking.
Yeah, what were your thoughts, Kenny?
I thought it was a great idea from Bob and the ATA to bring together the chief economists of so many trade associations and get a trip around the U.S. economy all on one day.
Well, as you said, Bob, we heard from a lot of economists from a lot of different parts of the economy. How would you describe the overall mood when we look at retail and construction and manufacturing?
It's certainly up and up more better than if we had done this a year ago, right? There's no doubt. So I thought, even parts of the economy that have been struggling, manufacturing, for example, they were certainly more upbeat. So I got an upbeat sense from most of them.
Yeah, and I would agree. Other than maybe cars coming or automotive coming off a little bit next year after a long, strong run. As Bob said, manufacturing was good with commodity prices coming back, and I think the mood of the economists was broadly upbeat.
So what does this all portend for trucking? I know the first half of the year was expected to be so-so, and it has been so-so. We know ELD certainly will have an effect. How does everything we heard today sort of affect trucking and its business going forward?
Well, one of the things I've heard from a lot of the motor carriers here is for many of them, they're some would say 4 weeks ago, some say 8 weeks ago, but most of them say freight is picked up, right? And we saw that in some of our numbers, and we put out for May certainly, a little softer in June, but still didn't give back everything. So, for the trucking industry, I think, you're going to have your choppiness, but we should be moving up with the rest of the economy.
Yeah, and I would say that we think that we came into this year with a capacity overhang. Too many trucks relative to the amount of freight. So getting these positive notes from the different sectors of the economy suggests that there should be better freight creation in the second half of the year, help absorb some of that capacity, and hopefully that leads to better trucker profits.
Does today's event portend the idea that it's not just the seasonality that you normally have when things pick up in the April, May, June timeframe, but that there's actually more behind it that can carry into the third and fourth quarter and even next year?
Well, I think that's the question, but and it's a big question. But generally, again, you go back a year ago, the economy's in better shape today than it was a year ago. So, we'll have to wait and see, but I'm a little bit more optimistic, certainly more optimistic than I was a year ago.
Kenny, one of the things you brought up in your presentation I found interesting was the fact that that orders are starting to go back up. The actual production of the trucks, the delivering of trucks is going back up, and it's not because of the increase in volumes, it's sort of the prediction of the ELDs. Recap some of those thoughts.
So we were, as I confessed in my presentation today, we were kind of caught by surprise by the strength of orders coming out of the gate in the beginning of 2017. We think despite less than stellar carrier profitability, we think small and medium truckers have come back into the marketplace, for better fuel economy, for some OEM incentivization in the marketplace to help them get into some newer equipment, and confidence. I think that was something that was touched on several times today. That confidence is certainly helpful at the outside.
The other thing you brought in, and this is for both of you guys, we talk a lot about ELDs here, and without going into precise numbers, obviously, some people are on the side of the scale that say, oh, this is going to be one of the biggest capacity crunches we've ever seen. Some say this is all way overblown and it's going to be a minimal effect, if any. Where on the scale are you guys at on that front?
Go ahead.
Okay. For ACT's opinion, we think it's similar to the mid-2013 change in hours of service. So we think about a 3.5% to 4% capacity hit, though unlike that change in hours of service rules, it won't be a one day, next day type of event, but it's something that's going to be spread out over the course of say 12 to maybe even 18 months.
Yeah, from nothing to, a major, it's in between. I agree with Kenny. I don't know the number for sure, but it's certainly not adding to capacity. It is taking away,
Right.
and it will, and if you get freight picking up at the same time, that will also impact on how it's felt in the marketplace. If freight were to, I'm not saying this is the case, but if freight were to soften, well, then the impact wouldn't be felt as much. So it also depends on where demand is.
Well, you brought up something in your presentation related to this. I think you called it the miniaturization of freight. Talk a little bit more about that and what it means for the statistics you track on trucking.
So if you look at the number of loads transported in the truckload space, we have seen a sort of gradual decline in the average annual gain, right? You go back to the 1990s, we used to grow faster than the broader economy. But since then, we've seen this miniaturization of freight. All the technology we buy is smaller, right? Shippers have taken air out of packaging. They've taken water out of products, out of laundry detergent. You add it all up and you can go, as one fleet once told me, he's like, I used to haul 100 TVs on a trailer. Now I haul hundreds of TVs on a trailer. You add all that up and it causes our volumes essentially not to be as high as they would have been.
Yeah, and the other thing you mentioned was the length of haul. I know some of this is that, we'll use the name of the company here, Amazon effect of them having DCs like springing out of every little city in the United States. Is that a trend that you see continuing? And if so, is there anything the trucking community can do to offset the fact that you don't generate as much revenue if your haul is shorter?
Yeah, well, it's generally been not just online retail, but brick and mortar as well. They have many, you used to have a handful of distribution centers in the year 2000. Now you have dozens of them for the same company. And the average length of haul has fallen from almost 800 miles in dry van, truckload, to 533 last year. That's a 33% drop. I don't think that rate of decrease can continue, but certainly you might have a leveling off. I doubt it, and it's not going to go up. Then you have some other things with the different ports bringing in, on the East Coast and so forth. So I don't know if it continues at that rate, but we'll have to wait and see what the retailers do.
One of the things you released recently was your 10-year, 11-year long-term forecast. Review some of the highlights of that, and then maybe, Kenny, I want to hear some of your thoughts on that sort of period over the next decade or so.
Yeah, so every year we come out with a long-term freight transportation forecast. It covers all types, all modes of transportation. All modes are going to grow. But some are going to grow faster than others, right? Trucking's going to grow about 34% in tonnage from last year to 2028. But you do have some modes that are going to go faster. Rail intermodal, although rail intermodal is still only about 2% of the total at the end. But pipeline, which is a bigger mode than rail intermodal, is going to grow 138%. So you do see a little bit of those other modes losing a little bit of market share to pipeline simply, but all are growing. And certainly trucking is going to grow at a decent pace.
Kenny, how do you see the next 10 years?
I think just pulling your last two questions together. So looking at the future and speaking of e-commerce and I think e-commerce maybe takes miles out of the system, but it adds to the quality of the freight that the trucking industry has to haul and has to deliver to the market. Where you used to take a box of 100 black shirts to the mall and it took them a month to sell them. Now you've got 100 black shirts going to 100 different houses, and they're promised this afternoon or tomorrow or the day after. So the cadence of freight is going to be much greater for trucking, and I think that quality of freight offers better revenue potential. So I think it's a sunny forecast, and if you believe the U.S. economy is going to grow in the next 10 years, as Bob said, all modes should benefit.
Kenny, Bob, thank you guys very much, and congratulations.
Thanks, Ari.